Hello, everyone, and welcome back to a new episode of ClueCon Weekly. I am your guest host today, John Gray, filling in for the Italian Eagle Luca Pradovera. And today we welcome back Jonathan Ellis. Jonathan, great to have you. Do you mind giving us a brief introduction for those who may have missed your last episode and just kind of let the people know what's been going on in your life since we last spoke?
Sure, I'd be glad to. So I'm the founder of DataStax, which is a company that commercializes Apache Cassandra. We've taken Cassandra, torn it apart, put it back together to be more efficient in the cloud for multi-tenant use cases. And we have a hosted service for that called DataStax Astra. For the last year and a half, I've been leading our development of vector search for Apache Cassandra and for DataStax Astra. So in the last 3 months, we released a new version of the underlying JVector index, which is a separate open source Apache licensed project. And I did a little write-up on using JVector 3 to index all of Wikipedia on my laptop.
Nice. Yeah, I definitely want to dig into that. In the last episode, we were talking about how you have a pretty interesting background hopping between product development and, how you were able to find, the things that you enjoyed. How did that background kind of fuel your fire in some of these projects, and where do you kind of see the value in that, and what have been some struggles as you start to vectorize these large databases, and making things a lot more applicable for Cassandra?
Oh, you're giving me whiplash, starting with the human interest and going into, well, how does it scale?
Yeah, exactly. I'm gonna touch on every single thing and see what sticks here.
All right. Why don't we? I guess we'll start with the first part then, because once we start talking about how the code works, then nobody's going to want to hear about my background. So basically, what I shared in the last episode, and the short version is that as founder, I kind of took the standard move into an executive role path that's just kind of the default path, I think, as a founder. And that didn't really work out for me in the sense that it did not spark joy. Having a calendar full of meetings every day is like the opposite of what I want to be spending my life doing. And so at the beginning of 2023, I said, "Hey, I want to write code. Like, that's what I enjoy." And DataStax was able to find a way for me to be productive doing that, and clearing off those executive-y responsibilities. So that's what I've been doing, and that's what I plan to do for the rest of my career.
Awesome. Yeah, no, I can definitely agree and understand how that path definitely rolls as you kind of move through a company, but you join the industry for a reason, and to be able to find something that you enjoy makes it just 10 times better, and you ultimately end up with great outcomes, great products. And
yeah, I mean,
oh no, sorry. I want to hear what you were going to add to
that. For 10 years, I tried to convince myself that building a company was just as much fun as building code. But ultimately, I was not successful in convincing myself. And I do know a lot of founders for whom that's true, and like, great for them. And I'm not trying to take anything away, except that for me, that turned out not to be true, and I couldn't make it true by wanting it to be true.
No, and especially in the open source world, you find that a lot. People with insanely strong technical backgrounds in some of these roles that really aren't fully technical, but using that background really helps shape, and you definitely notice a difference between those who are able to lead teams with some quality knowledge in the background. And I know here at SignalWire FreeSwitch, we all kind of say that we're all tech developers, in some regard, and that really helps just add a lot of meaning to what we do because we're passionate about them. And to kind of bleed into what you were able to do with Wikipedia, I definitely want to hear a little bit more about that, because vectorizing large databases always comes with some performance drawback. You don't want to over prompt, over engineer, give everything, all the information in the entire world, because it's going to take a while to read all that. So how were you able to do that, and how can you kind of balance performance and large data sets in some of these models?
Yeah, so I was trying to solve a very specific part of that problem, which is, building an index of all of the vectors in that data set. So I didn't build my own data set. I used the public data set that Cohere contributed to Hugging Face, that uses the Cohere v3 embeddings, and they chunked up Wikipedia articles into 150-ish token chunks, and ran it through their embedding model. So it's basically an advertisement for, look how good our embedding model is, and look how relevant the answers you can get by using it. And so part of the reason that I went with that is well, first of all, it's a very good embedding model. In DataStax' tests, it's right up there with OpenAI. And second of all, it would cost $5,000 to create those embeddings like from
Hmm.
scratch. So having them put that out in the public, like, that's great. Like, that just makes my life so much easier when I want to go and test it out. So that's actually my go-to data set for stress testing vector indexes now. And so the stresses that you get with a data set that large, so to give a little more context of the size, the size it's 41 million vectors for the English subset, and it's about 180 gigabytes. And so that's including both the vectors and the source text for
Hmm.
each row. And what I got out of that when I finished indexing it was a 50 gigabyte JVector index, and then a 40 gigabyte on disk map
Uh-huh.
of the JVector index IDs going back to the article text. So if you go and you type in your search term, and then it comes back and says, "Here's your results," it can say, "Here's the chunk that matched that result." And so the reason that this is challenging is just that most vector indexes are designed. Well, there's two parts to it. One is that most vector indexes are designed around, I want to construct my index from the full resolution vectors, and that way you're going to get the most accurate index possible.
Hmm.
Uh, and so I don't have 180 gigabytes of RAM on my laptop. Actually, I do have a nice laptop. It has 64 gigabytes of RAM, but not 180.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
and then secondarily, when you go to search that, uh, you need to carefully design how your index works to minimize going to disk for large indexes, because if every search that you're doing does 1,000 disk accesses or 2,000 disk accesses, you can't serve that index at scale. So what we've done with JVector 3, and the reason I was so proud of it, is that we solved both of those problems of being able to search a large index, but also be able to construct an index whose contents are larger than your available memory.
Hmm. So I know a lot of this is open source. Can you kind of give us a rundown of, how do we get started with data stacks? How does Cassandra kind of fit into that, and kind of just the open source world, and your part to it?
Yeah, there's a bunch of different layers of open source. So the
Hmm.
lowest layer, I've been talking about JVector. It's an embeddable Java vector index. And then the next layer up is Apache Cassandra, which has pluggable index types for different data types. And basically, we just wired up JVector as as the implementation of vector indexes in Cassandra. And then the third layer is Astra's version of Cassandra. And so there's two pieces to that. One is we have a branch of Cassandra that's open source, and that connects to a bunch of cloud specific code that is not open source. And together those make up the Astra service. So if you Google DataStax Astra, you'll get to our landing page really quickly and be able to get started building applications. And one of the things that, for those of your listeners who are familiar with Cassandra, one of the things that we did with Astra is we recognized that Cassandra had a reputation for being difficult to use. And some of that reputation is deserved. And so we built for Astra a new document-oriented API. So it's very, you don't need to declare your schema up front. You can just start throwing documents in it, and Astra will index them for you and give you a CRUD API and a search API and so forth. So if you've tried Cassandra in the past and you're like, ooh, I'm not sure I want to do that again, I would not rule out Astra. I think it's worth giving it a second try.
Yeah.
And if you've never used Cassandra before, pay no attention. Astra's amazing and super easy to use.
Yeah, there you go. That's just the thing. And you realize these tools that maybe we've been using before comes and rolls out with the new implementation, and now what took you 2 hours, 3 hours, 2 weeks is now done in like a few matters of minutes. And a lot of it is greatly attested to a lot of the work that you're doing here. I know that
and I went and dog fooded it myself. So I'm not just saying that it's easy to use, but I went and I wrote a tool to index my local code repositories so that I could search them from the command line and feed them into a local LLM. And yeah, it literally took me just a couple hours to build that using the document API. And what was the most difficult part? Nothing. It was all super easy.
Trying to figure out what command line jargon you used before and misspelling something is always where I end up with those. That's too funny. You mentioned some different data types when using Cassandra. You guys specifically focus on text databases with those, or how, like, what varying forms of data are you guys inputting into these, and what are those up?
I guess on the generative AI side, yeah, there's a lot of text going into it, but Cassandra is a general purpose database. You can index integers and tokenize strings, and you can index dates and UUIDs, and so it's just a database.
Nice. Also on kind of the open source and just team structure of what you guys are doing over at DataStax, what does your team kind of look like, and where you guys at? How large are you, and where do you guys kind of see the trajectory of open source versus cloud sourcing some stuff, and as well as just internally your organization?
I don't have as good a handle on DataStax engineering as a whole as I did a couple years ago, but we're at around 150 engineers. Most of those are split between the United States and Europe. It's about 2-to-1 for Americans versus Europeans. And that's not like a ratio that we consciously set out to achieve. It's just like that's kind of how the cookie crumbled. Personally speaking, I would love to have more Europeans on the team. So if anyone's listening and is like, hey, I'd like to work on hardcore infrastructure problems, mostly in Java, feel free to reach out to me. But mostly, we do have a couple exceptions, but mostly we don't have engineers in Asia just because the time zone is just really
Hmm.
difficult to make collaboration work. And I think there's a little bit of a misconception, maybe among people, particularly people who haven't tried it much, that if you're working in a distributed team, that you don't need to have face-to-face communication, and that you do
Yeah.
everything over email and over Slack. And while it's true that I'm, I do believe that in a distributed environment, you should be playing to the strengths of that environment rather than trying to create a poor imitation of working face to face. And so 99% of what I do does happen on Slack. Um, you do need to hash things out in real time synchronously, uh, and when that happens, even if that's still happening over Slack, having those responses come back in a few seconds instead of the next day
Yep.
can make a really big difference. And so having the overlap between American and European time zones is that's roughly 4 hours a day. You can stretch it a little bit in either direction, but that tends to be enough. And if you need a longer planning session, then you can usually wake someone up early, or someone can finish late to make that work. It's just really difficult to do that in Asia, where you're almost 12 hours apart, and like
Exactly.
the opposite side of the sun cycle.
Yeah, there's nobody that I work with more than Luca, and Luca's based in Italy, and we notice that a lot. Unfortunately, he always gets the short end of the stick with having to stay up, at like midnight sometimes, being in Europe. But luckily, us in the States, we're a little bit, um, it's a little bit easier to maintain a normal hours of working, but streamlining a lot of what is happening, as you were saying, with just kind of like asynchronous production. Using Slack is a great tool. We at SignalWire and FreeSwitch are all remote. We will get to see each other at ClueCon, and well, I guess by the time this airs, we have already seen each other in ClueCon. But it really shows that when you are put in the environment that you choose and that you want to, you are really able to thrive in terms of productivity, and just kind of using those tools as the best you possibly can.
And it is a different experience, and it's not for everyone. Before the pandemic, I would tell people who I was interviewing, like, if they hadn't done it before, I'd say, just be aware that this is going to be a different experience, and here's some of the things that are going to be difficult for you. And if it's not working out and you think it's not going to work out, then please let me know sooner than later. Like, we tried it
Mhm.
out, it didn't work. uh, I'll help you find another position. Since the pandemic, since everyone went distributed, or went remote at any rate, which is not quite the same thing, people have a better idea of whether it's going to work for them. So I don't have to have that conversation as often.
Yeah. Well, that's pretty good. Trust is so important when you are working with these distributed teams, because when you're not able to look over someone's shoulder or have those daily meetings, when you trust that something will get done and that these people are working at their rates, responsibilities are being taken care of, you're really able to get all the wheels turning. Everyone works in their happiest environments, and then I hate meaningless meetings, as much as I'm sure everyone else does. I hate commuting. I mean, my commute from my bedroom to my office is about 2 seconds, depending on how much laundry is on the floor. And I would not give that up for, the world, just because, I'm able to be in the environment that I think that I work the best in, and, just kind of maintaining that. That's a lot of really what open source kind of is, and, trying to make this more of like a larger metaphor of just people contributing to the pieces that they want to contribute to, for just the greater good of what it is, being able to look at the whole problem and then being able to find your individual piece, contributing that, I think is how open source has kind of given us a little bit of a better model for how to run companies more efficiently, and just the way that we want to go about it.
Yeah, I think I have a slightly different opinion, or maybe a
Really?
different different emphasis on this, which is
Uh-huh.
that I don't think that being distributed requires a higher level of trust, but it requires managers who understand the problem domain enough to be able to tell if someone is not working out. And
Hmm.
you do need that. I think that the world would be a better place if that, including in face-to-face organizations. But
Oh
in a
yeah.
face-to-face organization, you can sometimes get by using physical presence as a proxy for getting shit done. And obviously, those are not the same things, but sometimes they are close enough. And
Yeah.
so you, like I said, you can get by. But in the distributed environment, you don't have that proxy. You have to be able to look at, is Jonathan committing things? Is he solving problems? Is he participating in discussions and helping other people solve problems?
Hmm.
So I don't know if you want to say it requires a higher degree of technical competence from managers, or if it just highlights the problems with technical managers who don't have that.
No, 100%. And a lot of it is really difficult to, articulate to kind of keep team uh, morale high, but also in terms of, you know, e- explaining what you. Oh my gosh, I'm blanking on the word, but just setting expectations, appropriately. And I think that that is something that's really difficult for kind of managers to relay, and that I think everyone's a hero in their own story, and I like to think that the incompetent engineer is tooting his own horn when he's doing a lot of those things, but not having that face to face communication does make it a little bit more difficult to set appropriate expectations to the level that they are. So I think that maybe that's a middle ground between our two perspectives on how to make distributed teams, the most effective and efficient as they possibly can.
Yeah, that's true, and that's true really in any communication, that you need to be more explicit than you think you need to be. For sure, I've definitely
Hmm.
run into that multiple times, and there's probably even a law that says even if you're aware of this phenomenon, you still need to be more explicit than you think.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and you mentioned something that I think is important, that there's a morale component to this, not just for an individual engineer who may be struggling, but also the rest of the team. Because if you, as a manager, are not taking action, or taking action very slowly with someone who's not working out, that really is dispiriting to the rest of the team. And so,
Hmm.
especially, I see this especially with managers who've never fired someone before, right? Like the first time is always the hardest. Like if you're thinking, oh no, I'm gonna work this out, I'm gonna coach them, I'm gonna save the situation, but you're not noticing the impact on the other 8 engineers on your team, like that, you're optimizing for the wrong part of the problem,
Hmm.
and it's just the wrong thing to do.
Oh boy. Yeah. Luckily, I've never fired someone, and that's why you still see the cheer and smile on my face. Um,
Well,
but
good for you, man. Good for you. I
yeah,
hope that
exactly.
everyone on your team has been amazing,
Yeah,
8 years.
definitely, definitely. Well, I know we can talk about distributed teams all day long. Before we wrap this up, just curious, anything else you want to plug? Give shout outs, give maybe some listeners the opportunity and some tips on how they can get, up and running with data stacks, and yeah, anything else you got going on in your life?
Can we post links that will appear with the episode, or do I just need to tell them what to Google for?
Yeah, we will throw them down in the description. So you can
Okay.
say,
Yeah. So I'll give you a link to the article on Wikipedia on a laptop, and let me know what you think, everyone.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Jonathan. Great episode. Great meeting you. And until we meet again.
Thanks, John. Appreciate it.